policies and regulations. Over to you, Ross.
Thanks, Ben, and welcome to everyone who's joining us this afternoon. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to come learn about Centre Plan Package B and hopefully provide us with a little bit of feedback today. Next slide, please. So as Ben mentioned, the primary topic of today's presentation is the established residential areas of Centre Plan Package B. And of course, everything we'll be talking about in this presentation is it's not yet adopted by Regional Council. It's in the draft Package B planning document. So the established residential areas, when we say that, what we're really talking about for the most part is the areas of the regional centre that are currently zoned R1 and R2 under the current land use bylaws. That represents about 29% of the regional centre's land area and about 33% of the population. There are currently 7 different zones and 3 different land use bylaws that are currently guiding development in this area. Slide 8, please. There's several sources of policy direction which guide the established residential designation and how the centre plan writes the policies and regulations for it. The first document is the regional plan, HRM's regional plan. The centre plan draft document, that's otherwise known as the purple document, which was endorsed by Regional Council in 2017. The recently adopted integrated mobility plan, which speaks to an integrated approach to active transportation and transit, among other things in the municipality. The affordable housing needs assessment, and an ongoing analysis of population and demographic change in the municipality. Ultimately, what this policy direction and research provides us with are 3 major themes for the established residential areas, which outline that the ER areas are intended to play a minor role in accommodating population growth, but consistent direction to increase low-density housing options, and of course to coordinate land use and transportation planning together within the context of this designation. Slide 9, please. Some other considerations that are taken into account with the established residential designation, increasing population growth. The last couple of years, HRM has seen increased population growth relative to years prior. Decreasing household sizes have changed the types of housing that are required in the municipality. Generally, smaller sizes of units are required to respond to smaller household sizes. Increasing rent levels in the last few years, we've seen the cost of rent in rental housing rising faster than it previously has, also coupled with a decreasing vacancy rate because of a not quite enough supply of housing and decreasing affordability as a result of all of those factors in the municipality are things that we're observing at this time. Slide 10, please. There are several opportunities we wish to highlight within the established residential designation that Centre Plan can take advantage of. We can align policies and regulations with the regional plans and other plans that have been conducted in recent years. We can simplify and standardize regulations. So that means things like, for example, standardizing the definitions and approach to certain uses and things like that that are currently kind of fractured and have different approaches through all the different land use bylaws. Enable more housing forms and uses that support complete communities, provide for more housing opportunities for owners and for renters, and to support local built form character of our neighborhoods. Slide 11, please. I want to take a moment to talk about a couple of planning tools and just kind of address some of the kind of words that we're using in the presentation so that the people listening in know what we're talking about. So designation, when I say established residential designation, that's a policy tool. It's an overall general land use category in the plan itself and includes policy objectives and also talks about things like character precincts and is ultimately implemented through zones or zoning. A zone implements the plan policies and it can specify land uses and other controls such as height, setbacks, and lot coverage. So the zone is typically what kind of most people think of when they think of land use regulation, because it has the things like how high your building can be and how far it has to be from the street and things like that. Excuse me. And finally, we have special areas which implement exceptions or applies additional requirements to those general zone requirements. And then maps. And in center plan, we have several things that are implemented through maps, such as setbacks and height, amongst some other things. Slide 12, please. So we have here a map showing the designations in center plan package B. I'll also note that the package A zones, which were approved by regional council last year, 2019, are shown in gray. So they're grayed out just to indicate that they're already an approved plan, but the package A zones are shown in a variety of colors, and those are the ones that are still in a draft form, not yet approved by regional council. And the largest color, or the most frequently used color on the map there, the yellow, is the established residential designation, which is the primary subject of today's presentation. Slide 13, please. So this designation is applied over predominantly low-rise residential areas, and the primary intent is to provide opportunities for a variety of housing types, while also protecting the character of established neighborhoods, and to support a variety of uses like local commercial uses, institutional, park and recreation, amongst a couple others that are complementary to those areas. Slide 14, please. There are 4 proposed zones in the draft established residential designation. The first is established residential 1, or ER1. This is applied to lands that are not located on major or minor community nodes or urban structure links, and I'll talk a little bit more about what those major or minor nodes and urban structure links are in a minute. ER1 zone generally permits single unit dwellings and a secondary suite or a backyard suite. And there's a conversion area that I'll speak to in a moment that can allow up to 3 units in certain locations and in certain situations. The ER2 zone applies to lands in close proximity to, but not directly abutting the urban structure links and nodes. And generally, this zone permits up to 3 dwelling units on a lot, and also permits townhomes and semi-detached buildings. And there's the ER3 zone, and this is applied directly to lands that abut urban structure links. This zone allows up to 4 dwelling units per lot, as well as townhomes, everything basically in addition to the ER2 uses, and also permits local commercial uses on all lots. Excuse me. And the land lease community zone, or LLC zone, that applies to existing land lease communities and allows for mobile home and accessory uses. So those are the 4 zones that are in the established residential designation. Slide 15, please. So on the last slide, I spoke briefly about urban nodes and links. This is a way that the plan organizes, in part, some of the zoning in the established residential designation. It's located on map 2 within the plan. And basically what these are streets with existing or emerging mixed uses. Those are urban structure links, as they're called in the plan. And they connect people and places of significant activity, such as parks, schools, and commercial areas. These links often have active transportation routes, but they're also sometimes created to support complete communities and to provide more housing options. And if you look at the image to the right, the thick black lines are the urban structure links, and the circles are nodes. So there's major nodes. Often those are placed on sort of package A lands with centers. Those are the large white circles, for example. And the minor nodes are other areas of activity throughout the regional center. Those are minor nodes with the gray and the X in the middle. Slide 16, please. So the zoning and how it was placed considered multiple different aspects of the environment in the regional center. So it considered existing zoning, as we alluded to before. It also considered current unit density and mix, the mobility links and nodes that I just spoke to, proposed and existing heritage conservation districts, and the zoning also attempts to minimize downzoning. So we wanted to make sure that there was opportunities for a variety of housing. So in most cases, there's minimal change to the potential unit density on each lot. And there's provisions for non-conforming uses and structures under both the HRM Charter and additional flexibilities under the land use bylaw that I'll highlight in another slide. The image to the right is showing, it's one of the pieces of analysis that staff used when we were, placing the zoning and the established residential designation, just one tool amongst many. But what the map shows is the current number of units in each building, and that helped to provide the rationale for where each type of zoning would go based on the existing density of residential units. Slide 17, please. So here's an example of how all this comes together to show how the zoning in the draft document is proposed currently. You'll see the ER3 zone there is placed along Oxford Street, which is identified as an urban structure link in the plan on map 2. ER2 is placed directly behind the ER3, and in the draft document it speaks to ER2 as sort of acting like a buffer between the urban structure link and the rest of the community behind it. The ER1 zone is on the interior of the established residential communities behind the ER2 zones. And this is just one example from Halifax. And if we go over to slide 18, we can also look at an example from Dartmouth. So very similar here. You can see the ER3 applied along the urban structure link there, the ER2 behind it, and of course the ER1 on the interior of that community. So that's a sort of a typical example of how the zoning is meant to play out throughout the regional center. Slide 19, please. This table shows the permitted residential land uses in each zone. I think I've already discussed them in enough detail, but this is kind of an excerpt of how the permitted use table looks in the land use bylaw, the dot indicating when a use is permitted in the zone. And I encourage anyone who's interested in watching to go check out the land use bylaw, and you can find the permitted use table, and you can see which uses are permitted throughout all the ER zones and all the other ones as well. Slide 20, please. Excuse me. So just to discuss some typical built form controls of the established residential designation. Typically for minimum front and flanking yard setbacks, we're looking at about 0.5 meter to 1.5 meters. Minimum side yards are typically 1.25 meters. Excuse me. Minimum rear yard is 6 meters, and that rear yard is actually brought forward from the current Halifax Peninsula land use bylaw. So that's maintaining that requirement. To provide adequate buffering between different uses and different residentially zoned lots. Maximum lot coverage is between 35 to 50%. Typically it's 40%, but there are a couple of examples and special areas where the 35 or 50% is applied. Maximum height in the ER zone is typically 11 meters or 36 feet. Very slight increase of 1 foot from the current permitted height in much of the regional center. It's usually 35 feet. 9.2 meter maximum height in downtown Dartmouth, proposed heritage conservation districts, and some special areas, and that's to reflect some places in downtown Dartmouth that currently have a maximum height of 9.2 meters already. So we're maintaining that through the draft proposal. 8 meters on registered heritage buildings, and that is to discourage the demolition of those registered properties by placing the low height permission on those properties in the established residential designation. And finally, attached garages maybe no closer to the street line than the front wall of the main building, and the intent there is just to primarily feature the house structure from the street and not the garage. Slide 21, please. Center plan permits townhomes. As I mentioned before, the draft proposal for the ER areas proposes to permit townhomes in the ER3 and ER2 zones. In the ER3 zone, townhomes are proposed to be permitted up to 8 units in a block. That just means 8 contiguous units in a row. And in the ER2 zone, they're proposed to be permitted up to 4 units in a continuous block or row. They're included in the proposal because they provide an additional low density housing option. The table below is drawn from CMHC housing data from the federal government. It's just showing that in HRM, the average value of row housing, or what we're talking about, basically townhomes, tends to be a little bit less than, or more affordable than other forms of low density housing. And that's just one of the reasons why they're being proposed through the plan. Slide 22, please. Package B proposes several precincts, which are then implemented through 13 special areas in the land use bylaw. And what these special areas do is they allow the plan to customize regulations to the local built form conditions. And this would, this would affect things like minimum lot size, minimum frontage, side yards, setbacks, maximum coverage, and in certain cases, maximum building footprint for single unit dwellings. These special areas do not impact materials, colors, or other details. That's typically a level of detail reserved for heritage conservation districts. But the intent is to maintain the character of these areas through preserving built form without impacting permitted uses. Slide 23, please. And this map is showing the proposed special areas. You can see that they're located throughout the regional center and throughout the established residential designation, and they're listed off to the side there on the right. But like I said, these 13 special areas are for local built form to be expressed through our regulations. Slide 24, please. As I mentioned before, there's a 3-unit conversion area in the ER1 zone that's proposed through the draft package B. This would permit existing certain buildings to convert internally to up to 3 units. And this is brought forward in part from the Halifax and downtown Dartmouth plans with some changes. So the minimum permitted size of any unit that would be created through this regulation would be 55 square meters, which is approximately 592 square feet. The intent is to permit larger underutilized buildings to add 1 additional unit compared to those other buildings in the ER zone that would be permitted a secondary suite. Through the proposed regulation, the building cannot be expanded to accommodate any new units, and it must exist, the building must exist as of the coming into force date of the bylaw. So new buildings would not be eligible to convert to 3 units. It's only for existing buildings. And as I said, there are some changes to this compared to the previous conversion clauses that are in the current land use bylaws and plans, in that it's more flexible than the previous clauses and that it does not disqualify buildings that added small additions prior to the adoption of Center Plan Package B. Slide 25, please. And this map is just showing in the dark gray the area where the conversion would be permitted. Typically, it's the south end of Halifax Peninsula and the downtown Dartmouth area within the established residential designation. Slide 26, please. I mentioned before the maximum of 8 meters height on registered heritage properties in the established residential designation. There's also some flexibility with non-conforming provisions on all proposed heritage conservation districts. Some of the proposed heritage conservation districts contain uses that are not permitted in the ER1 zone. So an example would be townhomes that exist, pre-existing townhomes in some heritage conservation districts. And there are some flexibilities we'll speak to in a moment in more detail that just permit those buildings to continue to exist and make minor expansions. And I'll speak to that more in a moment. Slide 27, please. We wanted to take a moment to highlight specifically the proposed Yonge Avenue special area and specifically 2 development agreement policies, 10.35 and 10.36, that are proposed in the draft document. The Yonge Avenue special area, I'll speak just to the special area first and how it pertains to the land use bylaw. This tailored local built form controls to the existing context. So this brought forward amendments that were completed in the current Halifax land use bylaw in 2017 and that were adopted by Regional Council. So these amendments pertain to the lot area and lot size, as well as some lot dimension controls, and that's brought forward as it is through the Yonge Avenue special area. But there are 2 new development agreement options that are in the proposed plan to support the existing built form and context sensitive infill on existing lands and buildings in the Yonge Avenue special area. So the first development agreement option would permit excuse me, up to 6 units within existing buildings in the special area, subject to some design requirements through development agreement. And the second option would permit up to 4 units on existing vacant lots, subject to design requirements, but it has the same lot sizes as the Yonge Avenue special area, but with more narrow frontages. Slide 28, please. Consistent with region-wide amendments that were recently passed by a regional council, Center Plan proposes to permit secondary and backyard suites in all lots in the ER designation. This would permit buildings that are a single unit dwelling, a 2-unit dwelling, a semi-detached, or a townhouse dwelling to have one of either a secondary suite or backyard suite. It's not possible to have a secondary or backyard suite on the same lot. It's just one or the other. A secondary suite is defined as a separate subordinate dwelling unit to the main dwelling unit and has a maximum square footage, floor area, excuse me, of 80 square meters. And a backyard suite is a dwelling unit contained within an accessory structure. So backyard suites are treated the same as accessory structures in terms of their built form controls. So there's a minimum 1.25 meter setback from side and rear lot lines, a maximum of 5.5 meters in height, and a maximum 60 square meter footprint and 90 square meter floor area for backyard suites proposed through Center Plan. Slide 29, please. Just take a moment to discuss shared housing and exactly what that means through Center Plan. So this is a type of housing that's permitted in all residential zones at a comparable or compatible scale, excuse me, and was coordinated with a region-wide project. And this permits what's called a small shared housing use in the established residential zones, which can contain at least 4 and no more than 10 bedrooms, depending on the zone and the type of structure that it's located in, that meet one or more of the following conditions. The bedrooms could be rented separately to occupants. They could include medical assistance to occupants. They could be provincially licensed under the Homes for Special Care Act, or they could be operated by a nonprofit organization for a registered Canadian charitable organization, or any combination of these 4. So shared housing, and again, it's up to 10 bedrooms depending on the location and the zone and the structure. And as little as 4 bedrooms as well. Slide 30, please. Bedroom counts are proposed to be brought forward, and those are to control density in established residential areas. These are currently already used in some land use bylaws in Halifax, but they're proposed to be spread across the regional center in the areas. And the maximum bedroom count ranges from 6 bedrooms for a single unit dwelling up to a maximum of 10 bedrooms for dwelling units, for 4 dwelling units. Slide 31, please. Local commercial uses are a new proposed use through the draft package B. These are proposed to be permitted in all ER and LLC zones, on the ground floor of all ER3 zones, and on the ground floor of corner properties only in the ER1 and ER2 zones. The local commercial use is up to 200 square meters in floor area, so that equates to about 2,152 square feet, and offers goods or products for sale or rent, including businesses that offer personal services. It does permit food prepared on or off-site, but excludes restaurants and also excludes drinking establishments. Slide 32, please. So this map here is showing the approved package A zones, and that's the dark gray that you'll see on the map, and also showing the walking distance to those package A zones. And the walking distance is shown as 400 meters, as expressed as a buffer from those package A zones. And what this map is essentially showing is, excuse me, that the walking distance to the already approved package A zones is quite short and walkable. And there are quite a lot of opportunities for commercial uses to be provided through those package A zones, which will contribute to complete communities in a variety of places where people can get their daily needs. and that we've received quite a bit of feedback on the local commercial uses as they're currently proposed in the draft Package B document in the established residential zones, and that we're just letting everybody know that's listening in today that that's under review as we move forward into the next draft. Slide 33, please. Urban agriculture is permitted in a variety of ways through the ER and LLC zones, and it's as an accessory use. So just as a couple of examples, the keeping of bees up to 2 to 4 hives, depending on the lot size, is permitted. Egg-laying hens are permitted up to a maximum of 10 hens. The breeding, planting, and harvesting of plants, and the sale of urban agricultural products produced or processed on the site. So for example, someone might grow some vegetables on their property, and then they could have a small stand selling those vegetables on the side of the street by their property. Slide 34, please. Just a couple of other permitted uses in the ER zones, and that's outlined in section 61 of the draft land use bylaw. When they are permitted, one of the following is permitted in the ER and LLC zones. So these uses cannot be combined together. It's one per lot at all times. So those are home occupation, a bed and breakfast, small shared housing, which I spoke to before, daycare, local commercial use, and medical clinic. Slide 35, please. So how are things changing? Well, we have a comparison sheet available to the public at our website, centerplan.ca, and this shows a side-by-side comparison of the existing zones in the current land use bylaws, the Halifax Peninsula, downtown Dartmouth, and Dartmouth land use bylaws, and compares them to the comparable zone in CenterPlan. So those are a really effective tool for seeing how things are changing. And again, that's available on our website. Just as a couple of examples, the Dartmouth land use bylaw currently has no height limit on any of the low density residential zones, so CenterPlan is adding one. Typically the 11-meter height limit that I alluded to before. Simplification and merging of definitions, so having the same definition of a single unit dwelling rather than 3 different ones, as is currently the case, and a standard approach to certain regulations such as setbacks, height, and some other things. Slide 36, please. As I mentioned before, when we were briefly discussing heritage, a couple of things to highlight about non-conforming structures and uses. So a non-conforming structure is a building that doesn't meet the requirement of a zone, for example, a setback. A non-conforming structure can expand, rebuild, and renovate as long as the non-conformity isn't made worse. So if you had a house, for example, that was not meeting the side yard setback requirement in a particular ER zone, that house could be expanded, provided that it didn't get any closer to the lot line as the existing building already was. But non-conforming structures cannot access new uses in a zone if they don't meet the requirements. So if a structure was not meeting the setback, as I mentioned before in the example, but it's in an ER2 zone and it's an existing single unit building, it couldn't add more units to the building if it wasn't meeting the setback requirements of the zone. Non-conforming uses are a little bit different. So non-conforming uses are land uses that are not permitted in a zone. And I gave the example when I was speaking about the heritage conservation districts, proposed heritage conservation districts, that there might be, for example, a townhome, an existing townhome in an ER1 zone. ER1 zone doesn't permit townhomes, but as a non-conforming use, these buildings can continue to exist, repair, and renovate. And we're currently exploring a proposed addition to the land use bylaw draft that would permit low density non-conforming uses to expand within the bounds of the bylaw. So that would allow buildings to expand within the permitted lot coverage, height, and all the other controls for that zone.